Good evening. This evening's talk is titled Your Security Blanket. Your Security Blanket. So that can show up in lots of different ways. And you could say that your security blanket could be a piece of clothing, like a rock suit. Maybe. So it's not about getting rid of your security blanket. It is about being aware of the various ways, methodologies, structures, schemes that you have to protect your identity, your agenda, your hopes and dreams, your wishes, all of the other fabrications that arise out of hope for this and fear of that. Simply put. Anytime anything is occurring that is agreeable or threatening, to use the extremes, or seems to be not important, vague, or is kind of boring, we are probably going to do something with it. If it's entertaining, or if it's good, or if it's supportive, then we'll weave that into our security blanket, whatever that may be, which we'll get more specific about the different ways of having a security blanket. And what is security? What is the security about? It is about protecting the identity, protecting the self-centeredness, protecting the narcissism, protecting who you think you are. When we talk about someone seeming to be egotistical, this is just over the top emphasis on me, and my stuff, my ideas, and how great I am, and how you should admire me, that kind of thing. That's a little easier to see. Other kinds of self-centeredness are much more subtle and much more in the shadows, so to speak, or around the corner, or under the edge, or behind the curtain. And it is about, as I say over and over again, rarely do I say the opposite of this. It's about awareness of whatever's arising. It's about awareness of the form, not removing it, substituting it, modifying it. It's about the awareness. If you're really aware of whatever this form is, especially if it shows up as your particular security blanket, which may show up just as anything that happens, you've got ideas about it. You see it as being not just right, it needs adjusting, or it's not exactly what I think it should be happening. Sometimes having a conversation with somebody that has no mind training at all, it's just kind of tiring, because all you're really doing is listening to them parade around with their security blanket. I'm this, I like this, I'm good at this, I know this. What I think you ought to do is you need to get a job, or you need to change mates, or you need to stop being gay or something. Somebody producing all kinds of things, but we're producing, even as students of the Buddha's Dharma, as meditators, we're doing some kind of production also. If you weren't producing anything, particularly that is coming from some kind of grasping at a self, grasping at others, grasping, you probably wouldn't even be listening to me. You might listen, but it wouldn't be something that would be of interest to you. So again, it is about seeing that. It is about seeing that kind of a cover-up rather than getting rid of it or stopping it or not producing or not intellectualizing or not uh, condemning or accepting or ignoring. It's not about stopping any of that. If you try to do that artificially, and when I say before it's time that you see what it is, it's like stopping something without seeing what the whole energy field is around that particular force, which might be your intellect, it might be your sex drive, it might be your addiction in some particular area where there's some kind of form arising that you can't get enough of. You want more of that. It's not enough. We need more. Pardon me. So again, it's about observing that, seeing that form, and seeing that it's never exactly the same all the time. There's always some modification, and sometimes there's a modification. Then we have modifications on top of the modifications. So then you have several layers of blankets. One is a fuzzy Afghan, and the other one is actually very, very carefully crafted quilt made of all your ideas about everything. Quilting confusion. So I'm not against quilting. I'm not against thinking. I'm not particularly against anything, nor am I for anything particularly. What do I want? Do I want something? Yes, I do. I want to help you see what this is with your permission. Because if you don't see what it is, then you'll be under that security blanket that you're not seeing that it's there. You're not seeing what that is. And then when whatever, impermanence, simply put, this happens, that goes away, this, and suddenly you're caught somehow by circumstances that were unexpected. The powerful one, of course, is death comes without warning. This body will be a corpse. At that time, the Dharma will be my only help. I must practice it with exertion. The first of the four reminders that turn the mind towards what? The truth, the Dharma. All the different kinds of ways that a security blanket could show up in any given person. I may, as if I'm functioning as your teacher, I may be able to see what you're doing or how you do that. And even though I might be able to say, here's what you're doing, that may not be helpful at all. Well, it could be. There might be times when that comes up and that is fundamentally necessary. Quite often, what happens is I see, because I've been looking for a while, I see what's happening there. And I encourage you to see it yourself. I encourage you to see it. Sit down, train your mind to see how much you're missing, to see how much you're adding on, how much you're covering things up. You have to actually see that you're doing that. It may up in the metaphor of the security blanket is just pull that out of somewhere. But some kind of a way of covering up that other people can sometimes see it. They might not be sure exactly what they're doing. They might say, if they were to describe you to someone else, well, she's very nice. I really like her, but there's something that something is going on there that's not. They might not say not sincere, or they might say, well, you're a phony. But there might be something about that where they see it. Have you noticed how easy it is to see other people's security blankets? Or what you think might be their security blanket? The interesting thing is, other than possibly pointing it out to them, by the way, you're full of yourself and you think all your ideas are right and you think not going to be helpful to them. And as a practitioner, we begin to realize that criticizing others, being critical of others based on our perception of what their confusion is not going to be helpful to them. Each person has to see it themselves. And this is why the teaching person, if they function as a true teacher, will have tremendous, I don't know of any other word for it, tremendous patience. It's like they don't care if the person, if it ever shows up for their benefit, they're fine with that. But they want that person to see the truth for themselves. And if someone sees the truth for themselves, there's nothing left to do. There's not even a graduation ceremony. Why? Nothing is separate. Could have some questions if you have some. I know I've only talked for a few minutes, but sometimes it might be better to interact with all of you, or a few. Yes.
If it seems like we can see one of our security blankets, should we endeavor to wean ourselves off of it or become less reliant on it?
A little bit. It's more about the awareness of that rather than kind of getting rid of it or not having that anymore. It will take care of itself. If you just are aware of it, you don't fuel it by ignoring it. You don't fuel it by justifying it. And you don't fuel it by pushing or trying to get rid of it or shove it in the closet and slam the door and put caulk all around the doors and remove the hinges and file off the doorknob and paint the whole thing bisque. And say, oh, it's just a wall. No, that's where your security blanket is in there. So it's about awareness again. It's about the awareness of the cover-up. And it's astonishing. It's astonishing to begin to witness the way in which you, me, anyone, we're talking about you in this case, actually have a style or a way of covering up. Some of us do it with our intellect. We just keep thinking in circles and it seems to make sense. We think in circles that seem to make sense. We think in circles that seem to make sense. It seems to make sense. It seems to make sense. And it does make sense, the circle. But sometimes rather than it is an expression of your wisdom mind, it is more an expression of a highly developed intellect that is protecting the self that does not want to be seen because it realizes it's a clown on the roof. It has no credentials. It's insubstantial, and if it's seen through, it may show up, it may not. It may, because of causes and conditions, because of karma, because you're still downloaded as a physical being. It may come and it may go, but you always see that it's unreal. So therefore, no matter how intense the egocentric emotion or feeling that seems to be expressed by that dynamic, you listen because you listen to everything. You receive because you receive everything, but you add nothing to it. It gets no library card. It gets no credential. Nor do we snatch everything away from it. If it seems to come and present some kind of a credential, then be a good host. Listen to the credential, but don't accept it, don't reject it, and don't look away. Yes.
Can a security blanket also be a blind spot?
Yes. Quite often, it is a blind spot, or it could be characterized as a blind spot, but it's something that when you go towards it, something else takes you away from it, some kind of distraction. So because when we go to the blind spot, it looks like nothing's there. It just looks dark. And so this is one of the best ways, probably the best way to train the mind in this, to look into this, is to face the wall. Do a lot of it. Do a lot of it. It's sit down, hold still, look at the wall, and that's kind of a blind spot. It's like, whatever happens watching a wall, not much. If it does, we start to get real excited about it. I think I might be in samadhi. I don't know. It just really felt really good to me. Anything that shows up, you should go ahead and enjoy it, appreciate it, but it won't last. Nothing lasts. Anything that comes up goes away. Is there anything that doesn't go away? Yes. What doesn't come up? What doesn't show up is something. And you might say to me, so Sokuzan, aren't you showing up and you're running your mouth constantly? Yeah, full of lies. I say, don't believe a word I say. Don't believe it. Don't believe it, but don't disregard it and don't disbelieve it. Do nothing with it. It's a powerful, if you can understand those three, don't push, don't pull, don't shut down. This is basically expressed as consciousness. This is authentic presence. And why is it authentic? It needs no support. There's no falsehood about it because there isn't anything other than that. If there's something else, we got a stage play going on. And then we got a director, and then we got a screenwriter, and then we have a best boy, and then we have somebody taking tickets. I'm being silly, but you know what I'm saying. It gets very complicated, the whole phantasmagoria we call drama.
Circle bowing. Is this something we see through once and we're done, or do we need to continually see through the same thing over and
A
over?
very, very good question. It's like a little of each. It depends on the individual. This is why they have, in the Japanese tradition, they have the word kensho, because people sometimes begin to get some kind of a bright light coming through the cracks. And it's very experiential because there's such a contrast with the gloom and doom or the fanfare and expressiveness of the carnival of your life, however it may be. We see something else happens. There's a big contrast there. But when you see what it is fundamentally, there's no contrast. There's no longer a contrast. I'm not saying you don't have a memory of that, but since things are not fundamentally separate, I'll emphasize that. Since you can't find two different entities, two different phenomena, two different ontological structures, no two. If there's two, you can get something between it. You can slide something between it. There's a three. Can't be done. I mean, it can be done relatively. Of course, we do it all the time. It's called what? Politics, math, grocery shopping. That's why it's so powerful. That's why it's ultimate. That's why it's transcendence. That's why it's a spiritual path. And that's why there's so few people are doing this. People may meditate. They may belong to various sanghas, and I know I've been in a few of them. And I'm not being critical of anybody's practice, or I'm just saying that it takes a lot to do this. And if you may see this, but then it's even more unusual if you can actually teach it. I'm not saying there aren't teachers everywhere that are teaching this. Maybe. Or think they're teaching this, or trying to teach this, or other people think they're teaching this. If the teaching person needs anything, the adoration or the supplication or even the money of anyone needs anything else, probably not a true teacher. There's no transaction going on. Questions about this are good. Keep coming. Take me apart. Come ahead. You're all very smart. Yes, sir.
So, how does one prevent the kensho becoming a security blanket?
How does one do what with it?
How does one prevent the kensho becoming
Very good.
a security blanket?
All you have to do is see it. Just see that it's kensho. See that the last kensho I had was in June the 1st, 1977. And I was in a month-long solitary retreat. Some of you heard me talk about this before. I'm just using it because it was kensho. It was something that rose and faded away. And what happened is, after a couple of weeks in solitary retreat in a hut in right here in Berry County, actually, in a hut that I built, And I sat up and looked across the cornfield and realized that nothing was asleep anywhere. Nothing ever slept. But sleeping, the actual sleep, is illusory. There's no such thing as sleep. Ultimately, relatively, of course, there's sleep, but ultimately, nothing sleeps. It's an astonishing realization, and as a realization, it fades because it is not separate. So if you understand that, then you can see why anything that shows up is going down. That doesn't mean that what shows up wasn't the leading edge of some kind of insight or some kind of deeper understanding of the relative nature of ultimate truth and the ultimate nature of relative truth. So if you don't do much with it, I remember at the time, it's kind of like I wanted to tell people about it, especially people would say, well, so what was that like? You were in there for a month? Oh my God, I couldn't do that. And I said, well, I couldn't do it either. I don't know how I did it. So you get kind of a little bit proud of meditating for a long time, especially if you have a really good kensho right in the middle of it. But I had 2 more weeks to go. So by the time I got out of there, it wasn't quite as stupendous. And at the time, it wasn't even stupendous. It was kind of flat feeling. It was like someone said in my mind, nothing sleeps. It wasn't something I thought or I concluded. It's like someone else said that, or it was some kind of insight, but it went away. And so I would say, if you have those, then just keep your eye on it. Just look at it and realize that it's experiential. It's something that happened, and it may help you continue on the path to realize I have some deep insight into the non-dual nature of reality. I have some insight that's coming to me somewhat in an intellectual way and somewhat in just an intuitive way. So there's nothing wrong with seeing that. And but to the security blanket part would be kind of using that or clinging to that or trying to regurgitate that. Don't do anything with it. I'm trying to recreate it. It's like trying to recreate your vacation in Florida in 1993 or whenever it was. That was so great. Remember that one time where the hot water was so hot? The sun tends to do that to water, so it wasn't that big of a deal. Isn't it interesting how we'll go back to something and kind of dredge it up to have some kind of a reference point for something? And not wrong. It's about being aware of all that. Go ahead, Sokuzan.
Sokuzan bowing. Sometimes you ask us not to go on trips or leave the temple. And I wonder, is there security in Sangha? Is there security in staying at the temple? Bowing.
Well, I feel that there's security in the sense of continuing. We need to have, if we're going to train, we can't just be a flop around in the relative world because it's so contaminated with what causes and conditions and incredible violence. It's just so contaminated. So insofar as we can stay, this is why we ordain. I mean, you could say this is a security blanket. Somewhat, but it's functions a little bit differently. You could use it as some kind of a credential so I'm a transmitted priest, so I must know stuff. Not necessarily. Go on YouTube and find some transmitted priests and listen to them for a while, and use your own bullshit detector. And I'm always inviting you to do that with me. I invite you over and over again. Come on with your brilliance, your intellect, your insight. Take me apart. If you see someone here, take them apart. However you want to do it. Disprove what I'm saying, but you better have your pencils pretty sharp, because I don't think, and you do. I don't do it with thought. Big difference. So as far as Sokuzan, to address more specifically your question, I would leave that in your lap. I would leave that in yours or Ondo's, or I might come in based on talking to you and say, no, don't do that. do this, do this, do this, or don't do that practice, or don't move here, don't do that. But I'm not going to insist on it because I respect you. I respect the karma of the people that come this way. So insofar as you give me permission, if you come and say, I don't know what to do, I don't know whether I should live at the temple or if I should live in Saskatchewan. And I'm probably going to say, you probably should live at the temple. Say, well, I really have my favorite ski trail is in Saskatchewan. I said, well, I don't know. I mean, you could actually catch me up in your desire to do something else. I'm completely catchable. I haven't been inoculated against anything. Anything can find me. I'm for everything. It's an ultimate enthusiasm, and you could even say, what's that? That's a word. Power of positive thinking. I'm all for it. But if you say I don't know what to do, then I'll listen to you and I'll look at what I know about your situation, and I might say, you need to go to Saskatchewan. Or I might say, why don't you come here first and then see if you really still have to leave. I'm just using a hypothetical, but it's that kind of a thing. So it's not like ultimately what I know, as I've said many times, or maybe 15 times, I think everybody should be ordained. Everybody should be a monk. Everybody should practice the Dharma, but that's unlikely to happen because I think you need as much glue as possible between now and the time you pass back into the elements. So there's a best possible chance that you will actually practice training your mind. Interestingly enough, there are people who are totally devoted and practiced and trained and may even have a Dharma transmission, and they aren't near as clear as somebody who just meditates now and then. So there's no guarantee of anything. There's no guarantee that just because someone meditates. I know people that in the ones I know the best are in the Shambhala Sangha have meditated and practiced way more than I have. I mean, I'm guessing at that. I don't know. I didn't sit there with a clock. But when I say but, I mean, I should say and they're not awake. They're not awake. You might ask, I'll ask for you. So Sokuzan, how do you know if somebody's awake? And what will I say? You listen to me much? I don't. But they do. So if I meet them, not separate. If they know that, then I won't know that separate from them. I'll know that with them, just like I will with you when you awaken. We'll know that. It's called the meeting of minds. And it's not some kind of highfalutin, fancy, ethereal lightning bolts. It's very simple, direct perception of the nature of reality, which is not two, not three, not one. It's empty of your imputation about it, and therefore it can flourish. Even if the world comes to an end, you can't stop the force of this. You can't stop it. Is that cat meditating, Wendy? Or is that a carving of a cat? Or is that a bell on a cushion shaped like a cat? She's not going to tell me.
She has to learn how to sit and stare at the wall.
Okay.
Jessica has a question.
Jessica has a question.
She asks, can insecurity be a security blanket? If so, how?
Yeah, because we keep going to the insecurity for a reference point. So go to the insecurity, Jessica, and notice that there's a feeling of being threatened or being insecure, and just look at that. Don't make excuses about it. Don't add anything to it. Just look at the raw material of insecurity. Just that raw, see, I'm moving my hands back, just that raw feeling of insecurity. And notice how, in order to maintain the security, you have to keep coming up with scary things, scary ideas. What if that? What if that? What if that? What if this? What if that? And to keep going, keep that feeling happening and happening and happening. But if you just look at the feeling, you do nothing with it, you might feel more insecure without the feeling of insecurity. That which is real is not threatened. And so, but the path to finding or to seeing or understanding or uncovering or realizing that reality can be challenging, can be difficult, and can be not just frightening, but terrifying, depending on what your kind of wiring is about. You all have an idea what I'm talking about, or you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be listening to this guy.
Benjamin Swarthout from Florida asks,
Yes.
how can I practice in the thick of dramatic relationships, close, intimate, significant others?
Well, there's several ideas there. One is you can get out of those, which may not be possible. Your particular karma, your relationship glue, maybe like more like thumbtacks or more like gorilla glue. You may not be able to do that. So what you can do is find some kind of a form where you can separate yourself long enough so you can get some mind training and some practice. And the other thing is, if those relationships are really demanding, the main thing is to receive as much as you can. Do not argue, disagree, blame anybody for anything. Nothing is anybody's fault. The traditional way of saying this is all dharmas, or all truths, all situations that are arising, all dharmas, the dharma of this stick, the dharma of coffee, the dharma of human beings, the dharma of the Buddha, the dharma. All these dharmas are without blame. There is no direct cause. Even the Buddha's dharma is without cause. The causation is something we guess at because we think things are separate. This caused that, caused that, caused that. And of course it did, but it's even worse than that. Everything is causing something else. The something else is causing is not only the effect, but the effect is actually causing the cause. I'm not talking about crows, although it's not. If you hear a lot of crows in a field in the middle of a month-long retreat, it's pretty irritating. Even though they sound wonderful. Oh, the birds are here to accompany me on my retreat. Not good. So what I would say is whatever rises, be with that. And how do you learn to do that? You start by sitting down, holding still, and gaze at the wall. Sit down, sit very symmetrical, eyes, all the senses open, look at the wall and do a lot of it. When I say a lot, I mean a lot. Hours every day if you can. Otherwise, it's just more a hobby-like thing. Not wrong. Some people, maybe they just want to meditate to cool down. It will happen that way. But if you do a lot of it, eventually, it's like any kind of training. Eventually, you get into the real difficult part of the training. The hardest part about the Marine Corps to me was getting out of boot camp and going into a 2nd Infantry Training Regiment at Camp Pendleton. That was a lot harder than boot camp. It would have been even harder had I had to go and kill people, which is what I was training to do.
June Shibowing. Can anger be a security blanket?
Yes. And one of the obvious ways this happens is something happens in your environment with your relationship or with somebody or something, anything happens. And instead of just receiving that, just receiving the whole texture, the whole difficulty of the situation, which is dependently arisen, no one's to blame for it. Instead of feeling that, instead of having complete generosity and receive with our heart what is happening, receive the world. Generosity is not going to go out that way towards others unless you first can really receive what the earth or what the world, what the solar system, what the sun and the moon, what the Buddha and the Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times are giving you. Here, work with this. And then if we get angry about that, then of course that's a security. Our anger always protects us from reality. The very nature of the three poisons is ignorance. It's the aggressive kind of ignorance. And then there's the other kind of ignorance. Well, you know, the way that happens is the one thing moves up and the other's down. And then if you bring this around this way, then it looks totally different. Do you follow what I'm saying here? And then all you have to do is push it this way, and then it gets really smooth in this area here. Passion. And then the other one, the only person that really can do this well would be Nishikai. And I know he has stage fright, so I'm not going to ask him to do it. And that is just, it's this one. What? What? You guys know what I'm talking about. It's pushing, pulling, and shutting down, very simply put. Pardon my poor acting. You know, I've never had any lessons. Although I was married, how many times have I been married? 5 times. And what's the day after tomorrow? Friday we'll have been married 9 years. So far, so good. I'm getting really good at this. My son, one of my sons, couldn't make it to our wedding, and it was 5th wedding, of course. And he said, "I won't make it to this one, Dad, but I'm coming to the next one." You'd have to meet him to know how funny he is. So, but there won't be any next wedding. This one's good enough, right? Yeah, I'm speaking for both of us. So security blankets. Any other, Junshu? Any other question about that anger? That's a good question. That when that anger comes up, that is a defense. That is a security blanket. Your anger is something that reifies, substantiates, and validates me. I'm the one who's angry. I'm the one who's angry. Or I'm the one who's ashamed of myself. I can't do anything right. I can't get anything right. I'm terrible. It worked pretty good for me when I was a kid because I had the help of my stepfather, who reminded me every day how terrible I was and how stupid I was, over and over and over again, besides hammering on me now and then. Painful. But all dharma is without blame. He came out of his situation. I have no, in some sense, he probably helped me to have enough difficulty with my emotions that I decided to look for a dharma teacher, which I found because he had an appointment with me in this country.
Junshu bowing. How can I help others when I'm angry at them all the time?
Well, as you know, one of the things you can do is sit a lot. And the other thing you can do is just don't abandon the anger. Don't try to get rid of the anger. And also don't go the other direction and express the anger, because that's getting rid of the anger. To express it is to get rid of it. I'm not saying you can't tell somebody, I'm really angry about that. But to generate, like I was just the corny kind of acting I was doing here, sometimes anger arises that way. But that's a way we get rid of it. And another way we get rid of anger is blame somebody else. You're angry, and it's because of them. That happens in this Sangha, a fair amount. There's not much I can do about it other than saying, you're a mistake. That is your feeling. Nobody dumps a bucket of emotions in you. They're your emotions. Even if a person comes up and tells you you're an idiot and you shouldn't do that and you're wrong and you're a terrible example of a human being and you ought to go crawl back in the hole in which you were born in or whatever. If you blame that person, it's just a misunderstanding. It's not that they didn't do that. Causes and conditions are there, but if you're trying to get your credentials, your understanding out of causes and conditions, why even practice you're not even practicing a spiritual, but you're on a mundane path. You might as well go get a therapist, or go through a psychotherapy so they can unravel the tangled knot of blame that was conditioned into you, either in your childhood or in past lives. It's not about denying that. Of course, you have to include it, but to include it, you're not really including it if you're taking whatever's arising and pointing at someone else.
Bowing. If we begin to see how those emotions aren't the trigger's fault, will they start to back off?
They could, but the emotions are not the issue. You need to go through the emotions, and you need to feel the emotions and not accept them, reject them, or look away, so you can begin to have some possibility of getting a glimpse into your true nature, which is without a center, without a fringe, which is your Buddha nature. Your real nature is not no one in particular. And that's why I was saying, if someone is teaching and they want something, they're not a teacher. They're not a true teacher, because they're still in the merchandising mentality. They want something. They want some control. They want to make money doing it. It's not that you can't receive an offering from someone so you can continue to eat. But same thing when I say, I don't want any followers. Go follow somebody else. I'm not going anywhere. Not interesting over here. So yes, what you would do is as you begin to be responsible, have the ability to respond to your own emotions in a genuine way, which is they're your emotions. I'm not saying there's a you, but they're in your particular milieu, your particular sensorium, your particular aura, your energy field, your however you want to call it. It's not a self, but it has a kind of centrality that doesn't really have a solid center to it. Consciousness doesn't have location. Consciousness finds its own form, and it may be at a location, it may not. My consciousness might look like it's in this old man, but when this old man's gone, this body's gone, I'm not going anywhere. There's nowhere to go. That doesn't mean I'm going to hang around like a ghost and haunt people. That's a misunderstanding. So what will happen, to take what you were asking about a little further, if you continue to work with it, so you're responsible for your emotions, you're responsible for your anger, you're responsible for your depression, for your anxiety. It's okay to just be with that. Be genuine. Don't kill anybody, starting with your own thoughts, emotions, feelings. So kill nothing. It's the first of the 10 great precepts, is often misunderstood. Just like the idea of generosity is thought of as being helping people in different ways, which I'm not against, but you might want to start out by just giving everything your attention. That's what you should give first. And by not having any warfare or peace fair with anything, no polarities at all, eventually what happens is you begin to get flashes of that area that you used to think there was somebody there, and you can't find anyone. And when that understanding begins to look at itself and can't find anything, then still have a ways to go.
Sokuzan bowing.
Yes.
The security blanket ever help one go into the scary basement?
Sure. This is what the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha is about. It's a kind of construct or support. It will support you in training your mind, but won't buy into your storyline. This is why Sangha is so powerful. I have people come to me, not every time, not all the time, but complain about other Sangha members. And I say, that's a Dharma gate. That the person you're complaining about is a very close student of mine. And you're not you, but anybody could be complaining about that person. So it's a structure. It's a Dharma gate for you. Doesn't mean you have to be set yourself up to be tortured by somebody who is just happens to be a practitioner and likes to poke fun at you or whatever. But the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, it's just a powerful form, algorithm for how to use some kinds of forms, 3 different forms, to proceed on the path. So yes, there's something there. I mean, I'm sure any of you, especially who are fully ordained or lay ordained, or even people who don't ever intend to be ordained, but just have a strong connection with the 3 jewels. You don't have to do it officially. I don't care. You don't hear any propaganda coming out of me in that area. If anything, I'll probably try to stop you, because I don't think it's a good idea for you to do this casually like a club. Club or there's other things. Clubs. What?
Are you going to club somebody?
No, I'm not going to club anybody. No, I will not do that.
Kevin from New York has a question.
Kevin Townley? I know him. Really good looking guy. Has really nice hair. Go ahead, Kevin.
He asks, how do we work with big cultural security blankets like patriotism or racism, let's say?
You know, insofar as you can, be kind, be respectful to people. You know, just like if I was in the Marines for 4 years and I trained to kill people, I didn't have to do that. My father was killed in World War II when he was 26 years old, and in Andernach, Germany, just before the war came to an end. He did not want to go, but there wasn't any way for him to get out of it. He just resisted as long as he could, and then he just went in. And that's because he knew he was not coming back. That's what he told his mother and my mother. So I won't be back. If I go, I won't be back. I won't coming back. And he probably knew he was a Pisces, so he probably did know. So the only thing I can say is be respectful to people. Like if someone comes to me, the other day I was in having some labs done, and my tattoo says USMC on it. He had a tattoo that said "Camp in the Woods." It's a really cute tattoo of little tents and dogs and cats and things. And so I said, yeah, I was in the Marine Corps. And he said, thank you for your service. And even though that's an irritating thing for me to hear, I don't do anything with it. I said, thank you. So I just acknowledged, because I see where that person is coming from. But that's not the time to start to have a irritation around even the necessity of having a military, let alone a police force. Those are very irritating, including school, traditional school, where they test everybody. This is just it's an atrocious stomp right in the face of intelligence to say that everybody has to pass the same test based on what knowledge, and what is that about? Control. So when you come into these forms, patriotism and nationalism, even Black Lives Matter, which is a really important movement that I'm very happy that's happening. Finally, I'm delighted that's happening. So it's a powerful thing. But just because something like that is happening doesn't mean that somehow other things should be dismembered or ripped apart. Everything should be done respectfully, not just go in and rip things apart. I understand why they're knocking down sculptures, but you know, it might be better to take the sculpture and put it in a museum where these are the people that tried to take over our country at one time, have their sculpture, rather than having it out in the middle of the public square as some kind of an honorable general. So I could go on and on about the political stuff, but I'm not gonna. Hope I covered your question, Kevin. It's basically just be there for the person, meet the person when you hear that. And if it's coming on the news or something like that, listen, but don't pick and choose anything. Allow it to be confusing. You can stand confusion. Most of the world is really confused. But the The one who is clear is one who is clear about confusion. You don't get clear about clarity. Clarity doesn't need any help. Clear about confusion is water poured into water. Water poured into water. Common metaphor for awakening. You don't understand? Neither do I. Yes.
Robert Switek from Kalamazoo asks, how can we express fearlessness toward our security blankets?
You can't express fearlessness. Just it's going to feel very insecure to work with a security blanket. That's how you know you're working with it. So see if you can find out what it is and just go slow. Take your time with it. Examine it, look at it, set it aside. See if you can see by now. If you fool with it, it'll go in hiding and it'll show up in another way. It'll because it's like a stage play. Only you don't know if you're in the audience or if you're one of the actors or if you're the director, and those things morph constantly. Just using that metaphor. Less is better, except when it comes to training the mind. And sit down, hold still, so that you're more clear about these situations. That clarity comes from just watching things move without opinions, watching things move without stopping, watching things move without joining, without disagreeing, without shutting down, so that the ability, you could say, to see clearly is not hampered by the repetition of pushing, pulling, shutting down, based on wanting to be in control of everything. There's nothing to control, but there is something to see, and it's not separate. So Robert Zweitek, what I would say is just continue to look at it. And if you continue to look at something without pushing, pulling, or shutting down, it won't hold still. It'll start to change into a different angle of the same thing. It might feel like progress. It might even be some kind of progress. But it won't be necessarily static in the way you're probably experiencing it now.
I don't see any other.
Maria Bowing.
Go ahead, Maria.
If I have a scary thought and then I'm hearing the sentence which you said very often, don't believe your thoughts. Is this a security blanket which my mind is using?
Not believing your thoughts?
Yeah.
No, because that's something I told you to do. If I say it, it's okay. So it's a suggestion to you. I mean, you're having difficult thoughts, and I would say don't believe them, but also don't disbelieve them. So that's a middle way area there where there's some kind of belief, and yet there's some kind of disbelief. So actually, you're in a more of an open dimension there where you're kind of considering it, but you're not going to go in all the way and with your fists doubled and believe that's true or pound the tabletop. You're just gonna look at it and see what it is. There's more of a chance that you will receive that as it is if you don't believe it and don't disbelieve it. You need both of those, not just one. So you don't believe it, so you're not going to cling to it particularly, but you're not going to throw it out by saying, I don't believe that. So you're not going to disbelieve it either. So you're going to continue to look at the texture of it and see that there is some kind of validity there. It has an appearance that has a texture, has a quality, has a tone, has a fragrance, has an odor, has a quality, an energetic quality, like remembering a dream. They're unreal, but the texture of those dreams, sometimes the texture far outweighs the actual story because the feeling of the dream is so vivid. That's why that's quite often used as a metaphor for this life we're in. The sample dream is the one you have at night that tells you what a dream is, unreal. And then this is the actual dream. This is actually unreal. And this doesn't mean it's not, has some solidity to it. The very solidity is a clue to its unreality. Any further questions? I'll take, it's 9:02, but I'll take one more question out there in the peanut gallery. You have one?
Sokuzan Bauer,
Yes,
can the teacher ever be a security blanket?
certainly. It's a good kind though, because that's the last place that you're going to get any security from the teacher. Might feel like that for a while. Have you noticed? Might feel that way for a while. So sure, I mean, I always say, and I'll say it again, I say it over and over again, I meet people where they're at. Some people need a lot of support. They really need a lot of support, emotional, all kinds of support. And then other people don't need that, or need different degrees of it, or need support in different ways, need to be encouraged in different ways. If the teaching person can actually see what's happening with that individual, then they'll know, they won't think it up. They'll know spontaneously. Their relationship with that will be exactly what that person needs. Sometimes it's so exact to what the person needs that the person will freak out and go the other way, because it's too much. It's too frightening to the ego. You can have people project onto you that you're up to something, or you're trying to control them, or happens every now and then. Bound to happen. One of the things you can ask is there anything the teacher wants? I mean, other than to say, please keep practicing, keep sitting. Does the teacher need anything, demand anything of anybody? Might ask, but might even tell you, don't do that. But if you did something anyway, you wouldn't get any argument, or you wouldn't get any accusation, or you can do pretty much what you want. Further question around that?
Dedicate the merit.
We'll dedicate the merit then
Monastery.
at the monastery. And Wendy's little cat will help.
Penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way.